And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal. We welcome in head coach for Bellevue West, Mike Huffman, joins us to talk Daniel Kaelin. Coach Huffman, do you hear us okay? Thanks for the time.
I hear you great, man. What an exciting time to be a T-Bird and a Husker.
I like it. That's a good backdrop, my friend. I mean, the backdrop is nice, all those teams. And Coach Huffman, take us through the last week, this process and ultimately the commitment for Daniel Kaelin to Lincoln.
Well, I'll take you back a little farther than that. We had the opportunity for Coach Rule to come in January when he was coming around. And I've been in the business long enough and have enough respect for those guys that they have a very difficult job with recruiting. But we have a difficult job with high school, making sure that our players are taken care of. I asked him point blank what his plan was for Dylan Raiola and for Daniel Kaelin. And without hesitation, he was in a swivel chair in my office, and he kicks it back a little bit. He leans forward, and he looks up right in the eye, and he says, first of all, we'd be ecstatic and lucky to have Daniel Kaelin as our quarterback. But right now we're hard on another prospect. And if that doesn't come through, we will be relentless in the pursuit of Daniel. And man alive, that Monday, Dylan committed to Georgia. Coach Foley had me on the phone within an hour. They set up a visit for Wednesday afternoon. Coach Satterfield was out in California doing some recruiting, so he had to get flown back in. Coach Rule called me Tuesday morning. He was in Carolina getting his house packed up and getting ready to rock and roll. And they held true to their word. And both Coach Foley and Coach Satterfield came to our workouts on Wednesday, watched them spin it around. Now, the funny thing was our two stud receivers and even our next two were all at state track, because we're not playmakers in slow purple. We're playmakers in purple. And so they're all at state track. And so some of these guys catching. Now, a couple of them now are going to be the next guys everybody reads about. But, yeah, a lot of them were like DBs. And you remember the old EA Sports game? You played DB for a reason because you can't catch. Man, two balls literally went right through a dude's hand and busted him in the face. One was on a hitch and one was on a slant. And I'm not lying. I was sat, and I'm just, like, giggling, like, well, he can spin it. And so, they had to do some stuff and get it all figured out. But we knew pretty mid Thursday we kind of knew. And so, but he wanted to do things right, Daniel. And Coach Drinkowitz did a very, very good job with Daniel. And that's kind of why when he got it down to a Final Five, that's why he picked Missouri, because Coach Drink was so highly involved. That was a very difficult conversation for a 17-year-old. And I said, you just be upfront, be honest. I've got good friends in the business. They're men. They'll be able to handle it. Yes, they'll be sad, especially with being a quarterback. But he didn't want to go get any further until he talked to Eli personally on the phone, and that was tough. And my phone was blowing up all Thursday night because Missouri coaches were calling, what do we got to do and everything. I'm like, guys, he's wanted to be a Husker since 8th grade. And I'll be real honest with you guys, not everybody's like that anymore. You saw the commit video, okay, and all the pictures of growing up. It's not like that all the place. Like, Isaiah McMorris isn't even from here. I mean, he's lived here for quite a while, and he does like Nebraska, but he lived quite a long time in California. Dae'vonn's kind of, he's been just outside in Plattsmouth, but it's been a while since Nebraska was the Nebraska you and I knew from when we were younger.
Coach Michael Huffman's with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And, Coach, you mentioned the fact that he's wanted to be a Husker since 8th grade. Is that something that this Husker coaching staff knew that they had in the back pocket? There's a quarterback in Omaha that's wanted to be a Husker for a while, or is that something that was a secret to them, that they didn't know the interest level of Kalin in Nebraska?
I think it was a secret. If you really had to rewind back to that 9th grade year, his recruitment hasn't been very fun when it comes to Nebraska. He is involved in a national circuit of quarterback coaches that are very, very highly regarded, Elite 11 guys, things of that nature. And the Florida State commitment offer really came out of nowhere. I remember I was sitting down in my basement. I was right, at the preseason, right after these camps, and all of a sudden I get a call from Daniel that he got an offer from Florida State. I'm like, man, you haven't even played for us yet. I mean, you're the JV quarterback, right? And a lot of these things are projection, and he for his age, he really spun it well. Well, then that night Mario called, and he offered him a scholarship, and I'm like, okay, that's awesome, but it was kind of out of nowhere. But then the next couple of years there was no contact, and it actually got pretty sad. And I remember when Daniel was a sophomore, I started rotating him with the kid that ended up going to Morningside, and both really good players. I said, Daniel, I don't know why there's not more communication, and I'm sorry. It bums me out too. Hopefully that changes moving forward. And it really took for Coach Whipple to get here. And Coach Whipple loves to throw the ball, and he brought it up to their staff. Why in the world aren't we putting more attention on this kid? And then it kind of picked up. Well, then the heat with Raiola picked up, because it did for a long time look like that cat's coming. And right, wrong, or indifferent, people will argue about who they think's a better long-term quarterback. But, man, that kid is gifted. That kid is huge. He's got a cannon. And he's a legacy of one of the greatest Huskers to ever play. Mm-hmm. And a guy that for years has been coming back. I'm speaking of Dominic.
Yeah.
Right? So there were a lot of factors. And true to form, man, as soon as Coach Rule, the Raiola ship sailed, he was relentless. I was pretty impressed. I appreciate his honesty, and I know Daniel did too. And they did a good enough job. We knew where we stood, and that's okay. That's
so important, but if you're to put a percentage on it, is it rare? Is it 50-50? How
10-90?
Okay. There we go.
We got good relationships around the area. We're really close to the Iowa staff, Kansas, mm-hmm. Kansas State. A lot of the like people don't realize this, but the Kansas and Kansas State staff, they have huge ties to UNO. So we've known these guys forever. And then they go up to North Dakota State. Well, we know North Dakota State's here. Mm-hmm. Some of them went to Wyoming. They recruit here. And then Leipold's staff went to Buffalo. Mm-hmm. They still recruited here. So we've known these men for a long time. Those schools is pretty straightforward. But a lot of these other schools coming in, because Huddle has made it so kids. I remember when Isaiah McMorris was first coming over, he's like, my goal is USC. I'm like, USC doesn't recruit in Omaha. Well, they do now. Yeah. Huddle's really changed it, and the flights, when Monken, I know he's with the Ravens now, but when he came in last spring to watch all three of them, he literally took a private jet. He had his morning quarterback meetings, took a private jet to Epley, got a car, came to Bellevue West, turned around, and went right back. It's just a whole different world than what it used to be.
Coach Huffman's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Daniel Kaelin committing to Nebraska on Saturday for 2024. And Coach, I'm interested from an offensive style. I think Coach Rule is, yes, he wants a mobile quarterback, but he's also not so rigid with the talent he has in a room in a specific year. Tell me a little bit about Danny and his ability to bring that mobility portion to an offense.
Well, credit where credit's due. When Coach Foley called me on that Monday night, I brought that up. Because I went down to practice and then I watched the spring game. I really like what Jeff Sims is doing. And Danny's not that. It reminds me back, when we used to recruit all these runners that could throw there about 15 years ago. And mm-hmm. Could they really throw? That's a whole other story we won't get into.
It was wide open play action, right?
Right? You got to find a thrower that can run. And Coach Foley was quick to let me know about the round peg square hole. And then he obviously talked to Coach Rule, because Coach Rule brought it up again on Tuesday. And then Coach Sapp brought it up on Wednesday when he came. And they brought up a guy named Spencer Rattler at South Carolina. And they actually compared those guys, Spencer to Daniel, because Daniel, after his sophomore year, I said, I don't care if you even touch a ball this winter. You need to get more mobile. You need to get more explosive. And he spent a lot of time with Bronson Marsh, former Husker, out at Legacy, and that's what they worked on. And he is much different. If you really dive into his tape from last fall, our line wasn't very good. And now they're a strength now, because we played 11. We have 9 of them back, so we're really excited for this fall. But, man, poor Daniel, man, he was hiding. CPS was calling me a lot of Friday nights, right? So luckily I'm not in jail. I'm still here, and I got a quarterback committed to Nebraska. Guys, this is how cool this is. And, there are still a million Husker fans. My very first quarterback at Bellevue West, 2013, lives down in Arizona now. He texts me on Saturday, Coach, you've got to be ecstatic. You finally got your Husker quarterback. Guys, there's so many widespread rumors that I don't like. I love Nebraska. I'm sitting at a Husker. I don't know if we can see this here. I've got a Husker table that I'm doing this. It's ridiculous. I have a Husker chair in my office, which I forgot to put my T-Bird Afghan on this spring. And so, Iowa's in there, K-State. They're like, really, Huff? Really? You're going to do it? Like,
they show up and there's a Nebraska table.
Right? But, I've got enough kids. At the end of the day, I tell them, I try to teach them, look at the offense. And that's why I had to ask those coaches those questions. Look at the depth chart. The depth chart looks beautiful for Daniel. Sims is going to be a stud. If he's a super stud, he leaves super early. If not, Daniel's going to be a redshirt. He's a winter grad, so he'll be there. He'll be there this next spring ball. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things add up. Harburg, I know he's a great athlete, but probably more of an option guy, maybe that runner that can throw that we've been talking about. But it's setting up pretty.
Coach, was there ever a point you talked about you finally got this Husker quarterback, you finally got one. Was there ever a point where you gave up on that dream with Daniel, with him committing to Missouri? Was there a point where you thought it was over? Or did you always think that Nebraska was going to come back around?
Well, recruiting is so difficult now because of the transfer portal. There's not as many spots for high school kids. So we really, really coach our kids. If you feel the right fit, you need to take it. Mm-hmm. Or if you don't feel like something is playing out. And in 100% honesty, late January, early February, I thought the tea leaves looked like Raiola was coming. And so I said, Daniel, you need to, and 4 of the 5 head coaches were in our office in January. So we got to see them. We got to know how interested they were. That's where the conversation with Rule happened. But PJ Flexdown, Clark Lee, Drinkowitz, his other, I don't even remember who his 5th was, but their coach wasn't there. I don't know. I think he just fell out of 5 to B5. Mm-hmm. It was really a top 4. And I said, Daniel, you can't wait. You don't want to get left out. And I've been telling my receivers the same thing. I told they both have that official third week in June mm-hmm. at Nebraska. I said, you got to line up everything where that's the last one, and you'll know by then, and you need to make your call. Otherwise, you're left to wonder if there's even spots going to be open. People fill up. These scholarship offers aren't infinite. They got to figure. Somebody else takes them. Yours is gone.
Coach Michael Huffman with us, Bellevue West, Hail Varsity Radio. Daniel Kaelin committing to Nebraska. We wrapped up the weekend show, and boom, there was the announcement as he decommitted from Missouri on Friday. Coach Huffman walking us through the last week. Coach, I've got a couple more questions. We've got a hard break. Can I have you pause for a minute? Is that okay? Do you have a couple minutes? Great. Yep. Coach Huffman's going to hang on with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Can email the show, chris@hailvarsity.com. We'll get to your comments here in the stream. Our first segment, we opened up with some comments on Kevin Warren, a little bit more of an expose on the Nebraska 3-3-5 defense and recruiting so big in this state. And it's nice for Nebraska fans to have a Nebraska kid in the class, specifically at the quarterback spot. Head coach Michael Huffman continues on with us as we move through a Monday. Charlie McBride, Mr. Blackshirt, with us in the 5 o'clock hour. Jay Moore joins us for the Blackshirt Hour. So more with Coach Huffman, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal. It's Hail Varsity presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you Monday. It's Hail Varsity presented by Currency. We say hi to Coach Mike Huffman, Bellevue West. He's with us for a little overtime, an extra segment with him. Coach, I wanted to ask you about McMorris and Hall and just the recruitment process for them. I know there's some heavy hitters coming in, and you alluded to last segment just their trip to Lincoln here in June. Take us through the process for them, and you did such an awesome job of kind of laying out January to now, Nebraska and their involvement with Kalin. Tell me how Nebraska's been involved in some of the other schools that are chasing down McMorris and Hall.
There's a story of 2 complete opposite paths. Dae'vonn has been with us since the beginning. He busted on the scene as a 9th grader, got multiple offers. So his has been pretty steady over the years. And what it looks like is, over the course of the winter, the December, January, right before that February signing day, coaches come in, and because of their age, they would just say hi. They get eyeballs on stuff like that. And the majority of the conversation would come through me. But they can't start having conversations at that point till September 1st, their junior year. Right. Whereas the difference is Isaiah just got to us last June. Decided he wanted to, be a receiver. He was in a run-friendly offense that didn't throw it very often, and so his was much slower. And then the season was really unreal for both of them. Isaiah had, I think, 1,200 yards. Dae'vonn had 900 yards. Both had double-digit touchdowns. So it's nice when you have 2 guys on each side. Well, Isaiah started picking up. It was actually a guy named Coach Cooper. From Texas Tech, and he is now, Coach Jones, Emmett Jones, from Texas Tech. And I had to get him in my office, and I had to video him on the door with tape and squish his hands on fingers, and it's all got to be video too. It can't be pictures. And then so Texas Tech decides to offer him, and then as we all know, the rest is history. All the people start looking at it because they all follow each other. All these coaches know each other. Mm-hmm. Mickey was very, very interested, but if you see these two boys, although they're both fantastic, they both look totally different. Isaiah's 5'11", 6 foot. You couldn't touch him in a phone booth, right? Dae'vonn is 6'3", 190 pounds. Looks like he should be on a statue outside the Coliseum. But also runs I think he ran his PR this year was 10.62. Isaiah's was 10.65.
Jeez.
So they have this speed that these guys look for, but totally different pass. Last spring for Dae'vonn was insane because Danny too. All these coaches were every single one of our athletic periods. Guys were there watching him throw. Isaiah had that again this spring, but most of the guys, his quarters were really over the internet. Making calls. These guys call the head coach. They got to get out and visit. They got to reciprocate the interest, and they both have it kind of narrowed it down. And 2 months ago, I would have said that it would be a long shot that these guys end up in the red. But this young guy, Garrett McGuire, has just absolutely slayed it in their recruiting. And honestly, I think right now, I know USC and Nebraska are Isaiah's top two. Arkansas and Nebraska are Dae'vonn's. Tennessee has been a late suitor for Dae'vonn. Oregon's been a late suitor for Isaiah. But it's really interesting. I'll be interested to see if those schools that are coming in so late can make up that ground. But, I say that, but how long has Coach McGuire been on staff? And look how much ground he made up. Mm-hmm. This guy, he's slick, man. He can talk to these kids. He's good stuff.
Tell me, Coach, with Hall and McMorris, their relationship on the field, do you see these guys pushing each other to be great? What is that like? It's rare to have two Division I type receivers in addition to a Division I quarterback on your roster. Well, what is the relationship like between those guys as the pass catching options for Daniel?
That's a fantastic question because honestly, last year it wasn't awesome because, I want you to put yourself in a 17-year-old, 16-year-old kid's shoes and be Dae'vonn Hall, who's been we had Keegan Johnson, then we had Caden Helms and Micah Riley. Now he's going to come up. Those guys are gone. He's going to be the guy, right? Well, then this new guy comes and moves over into Bellevue, and he's going to play. And Isaiah he lit the world on fire. He set state records. He had 93 catches, 1,200 yards. Now, Dae'vonn still had a phenomenal season, but he was a little dejected, because, again, he's a young man. He's not a grown man. So you have to talk and coach those guys through those situations, understanding when you have a stud on each side of the ball, now the defense has to make a choice. Shoot, we played Gretna in the playoffs. They decided when we were in trips, or 4 over our 3, they were 2 over our 1 on the other side. So we were forced to run the ball. And we did okay, but, we were on our 4th tailback by the time the playoffs rolled around just because of some freaky injuries. So I'm guessing people are probably going to do that this year. With our passing offense, we scheme things to hopefully get the ball to the right guys. But ultimately, and that's what makes Daniel so special, and he really progressed as the season went on, he's reading the defense. He's not, I'm going to throw it to Chris here because he's my guy. That ain't how this works, man. He's got to read the defense. And if it's a check down to Dae'vonn, or if it's a deep ball to Isaiah, or if it's an under route to Ben Goodwater, or whoever it may be, that's what he's got to do. And, his first 3 games, he threw 5 picks. I'm like, dude, this ain't going to work. Our starting quarterback last year threw 7 in 12 games. He only threw 2 more picks the rest of the season, and both of them went off receivers' hands. And they were like Danny Dimes, but they went off the hands and they picked them. So he didn't throw a pick in our last 8 games.
That's impressive. Coach, outlook, summer plans, what's on the radar for you?
Well, we got the week 0 again, which is awesome because we play Creighton Prep. They're another great program. And so last year there were so many people there. We're hoping that, but it really cuts the summer short, man. We'll give them the week off to get out of school. We get to it June 5th. Myself, I'm heading out to Kearney with Coach Martin from Omaha North and Coach Frenzen from Columbus Lakeview. We're doing the Shrine Bowl one last time.
Oh, good, man.
We're going to let that rip and hopefully survive. And I see it looks like some rain out there, so I'll be bringing some ponchos.
Coach Michael Huffman, Bellevue West. Coach, you've given us a lot of time over the years. We love catching up with you again, and congrats to your program, to you and your staff, and of course your kids that put in all the work.
Thank you so much for having us, guys. It's always good when you guys reach out.
Appreciate you, Coach Huffman. Take care.
Bye.
There is Michael Huffman, head coach, Bellevue West, and just so much fun to talk to. We talk to him a handful of times a year. He's always so insightful with us. Guy's got a great gift to gab, and just love talking ball with him.
Well, I mean, it's incredible that in that, what was that, 15, 20-minute sit-down we just had with him there, you can see why his programs up at Bellevue West and why his football teams are always so good. He's knowledgeable about the game. He's a great leader of young men, and he kind of got into that with that answer with Dae'vonn Hall and McMorris. Like, one of the best in the state. It's always a pleasure to have Coach Michael Huffman on, because that dude is just fantastic. I remember back in my high school days seeing what Bellevue West was doing and being like, wow, they got a good one.
Yeah, 11 years and counting for Coach Huffman, and does an awesome job. And yeah, I mean, you just gotta help the young men get through it. I mean, still 900 yards and a bunch of touchdowns is nothing to sneeze at, but really insightful information kind of behind the scenes with Coach Rule and Coach McGuire and Coach Foley and Satterfield. I mean, flying in special from California to watch this workout. So, I mean, that's how the process, and we've said it, but now you heard it from somebody in the room about how Coach Rule communicates, is super transparent, and just laid out, here's what we're doing, and here's what we'd like. And good on Nebraska to get back in front of Kalin, and really cool that he's a Nebraska fan growing up. And Coach Huffman's right. It's not that there aren't Nebraska fans in the state of Nebraska. It's just not as easy to root for because of what the product on the field's been. You want to cheer for a winner, and Nebraska needs to get back to their winning ways. We'll wind down hour one. Mr. Blackshirt, Charlie McBride's on the way in about 15 minutes. It's Hail Varsity.